Welcome to TalkNorth.com. Thanks to our longtime producer, Brandon Morton. Please download before you listen. If you'd like to advertise with us, you can reach us at talknorthpodcast@gmail.com. And please follow us on Twitter at TalkNorthPod. Two promo codes to be aware of. BiteSquad.com. Use the promo code TalkNorth to get your first delivery free. And go to SodaStick.com, the great local apparel company. Use the promo code YouBetcha to get free shipping on any sized order. Roy, I was going to ask you about the unwritten rules of baseball, but I check with you first. Are there any unwritten rules about asking about the unwritten rules of baseball?
I'm going to deliver some virtual chin music to you if you're not careful.
Sorry. Okay, now let's seriously get into it, Roy, because the unwritten rules of baseball, they're important if you're in the game. They're maddening if you're not in the game and looking at it from the outside. And I know you don't spend a ton of time on Twitter, but this is the kind of thing where when you tweet something out, you get fire. So let's really take a section before we talk actual baseball, talk about the unwritten rules of baseball. We're doing the show on Friday morning. On Thursday night, well, you know what? I'm not even going to set it up. You set it up. Tell me what you saw and what it meant to you.
So last night, the Twins pounded the Texas Rangers, and at that point, it's 13-5 going to the top of the ninth inning, and everybody wants the game over, especially the Texas Rangers. And so the Jake Cave led off the inning, and the count goes to 3 balls and no strikes. So it's 3-0 count. And in that situation, with people, with the Rangers trying to get the game over with after being humiliated by giving up 13 runs, the pitcher just wants to throw a strike because the hitter's going to take it 3-0, and then you go from there. I mean, then it's up for the pitcher to continue to try to get guys out. But since time immemorial for baseball players, when you're pounding the other team like that, you don't try to run up the score. You don't beat a team 99-0 in football and keep trying and have your first team still in there. That kind of idea, right? And so he grooved a fastball to get back in the count, and Cave inexplicably had given himself the hit sign, 3-0, and hit a line drive base hit to right field. So everybody on the field, and one of the things that I said last night after this whole deal on Twitter is, look, everybody was on the same page about that. Tony Diaz had his hands on his hips. The third base coach, Tommy Watkins, the first base coach, went over, and you could see him talking to Cave, say, "Hey man, you can't do that." And Cave looked at the pitcher and patted his chest. My bad. I'm sorry. So then, typically, what might have happened in the old days is the next pitch, very next pitch, drills Max Kepler, the next hitter, to give the point that you can't show us up like that. That's you broke the rules. But he didn't do that. He was actually kind of funny to me, since it's not going to affect Max too much, thankfully. It was kind of funny to me that he actually was pitching to him, got to another 3-0 count, and then you could just see it was like, okay, here, try to hit this 3-0 count, dude, and he drills him in the arm, and he did. It was a professional way to do it. If you're going to do that stuff, and here's where people get crazy. About it, they get mad that shouldn't be the case, and I'm not arguing should or shouldn't, and I'll even go to the side of, yeah, you shouldn't. That's stupid. Why, if you don't want somebody to swing the bat, then just quit. Just say, hey, and they think, okay, 13-5, that's enough. We quit. Let's just take a knee here, from here. And I get all that, but as I say, since time immemorial, there was going to be, reaction. The third base coaches are shaking their heads. Rocco's in the dugout shaking his head. Everybody on the Texas bench thought that should happen, that the next guy get hit. And so the professional way to do it then, when he threw it at a place, didn't throw at his head. He just hit him. And Kepler went down to first base like a man, and now it's over. You're not supposed to do that. So the big question, so the way the game went, according to longtime baseball tradition, it went exactly the way it's always gone, and as a matter of fact, in a much more professional way than many others. I think it's important before we just decide. I mean, we can decide that that's dumb and baseball ought to change, but I think it's probably a reasonable idea to talk a little bit about where all this stuff came from and why it's why it's in the game.
Okay, let's do that. We're going to get some other baseball topics as well, but this is just a fascinating topic. There's so many aspects to it. I'm really conflicted about it, to be honest. I do want to say this is Roy Smalley's Chin Music, part of the TalkNorth.com podcast network. Thanks to our sponsors, Berry Coffee, berrycoffee.com, Tony Hoaglund, your State Farm agent who works out of Champlin, and Bite Squad, bitesquad.com. Use the promo code TalkNorth to get your first delivery fee waived, and then keep using Bite Squad because they've been great to us. That's the thing, Roy, is I'm really conflicted. So I'll tell you where I'm coming from, then I'm going to let you go back and explain the history of this and why the history is important in baseball. I don't think pitchers should throw at hitters. I just don't like seeing people hit. I know I know you got to pitch inside, and I know that this is a traditional way to settle the issue, and I guess in a completely contradictory way, I also admire when it's handled this way. And when you don't hurt somebody's head and you hit them in a part of the body that's got some meat on it and they don't get hurt, and I admire the batter who will take it and go down to first base. I love the old school stories about this stuff that you always tell. That I've always been a baseball historian. I love that aspect of the game when it's not beanballs. But one thing that strikes me is the Rangers, if they hadn't run into 3 outs in that game last night, could have come back and won that game. And Jake Cave getting a hit in that situation could have led to a rally maybe the Twins end up with 16 runs instead of 13, and maybe they win 16-14 because Jake Cave got a hit there. So I just don't think you can ever stop playing the game no matter what the unwritten rules are. But that's just my stupid 2 cents. I'm going to let you go back to explaining the history and where you come from on all this.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that, except that if it had been 13-10 or something like that, and he swung 3-0, no one would. It wouldn't have been a problem. And somebody on Twitter asked me the great sardonic, sarcastic question in serious form, and this summed it up perfectly. It seemed like an innocent question, and I just felt like the person just really hit on something, ironically and so maybe sarcastically, but in all innocence, he said, "So, when is what inning and how many runs? When does it change? How do you know?"
Right, and that's a good question.
And that's a great question, and it points out how stupid it is because no player, and I tweeted this back to him. I said, no player. Could really tell you definitively, what that is. I will say that 13-5 in the 9th inning is one of those times. I mean, it's clear. It was clear to everybody on the field. You don't keep pouring it on at that point in time. And I understand how people think that, well, that's your fault. That's the Rangers. I mean, you gave up the runs. You ran into the outs. You were responsible for getting your ass handed to you. So, it's stupid to take it out on somebody else unless why don't you just quit then? So, I mean, I get all that. Let's talk about where it came from. Way back when they started playing baseball, 2 things were evident. The guys that played baseball were tough guys. John McGraw being the manager, fighting with his own players. I mean, they were rough and tumble players that loved playing the game. That's what they wanted to do, and they would do anything to continue to be able to play the game. And if someone, that's why there was the Wally Pipp deal, where you don't take a day off. Somebody like Lou Gehrig might step in, and you're you're down the road, and it's the same. It was about having their jobs taken away. Well, pitchers, for example, would be aggressive with hitters. If hitters if a hitter was beating on a pitcher, the pitcher looked at that way back when. If he keeps doing this, I could be out of the game. He's not going to take my livelihood away from me. And he tried to intimidate the hitters by throwing at them. And they used to throw at guys. I mean, they used to throw at their heads. And the old knockdown pitch, it was called a knockdown pitch for a reason. I mean, guys hit the dirt. And that has been going on since 1906. I mean, that's just the way it was, because the guys didn't make money playing ball, and they had to work in the off season, and baseball was their biggest livelihood, their most fun livelihood, what they loved to do. And the attitude was, nobody's taking this away from me. So that's where all this kind of stuff came from. Baseball grew up as a tough guy game that gets passed down from generation to generation. It has been, because the young guys are all coming up, and their examples are the old guys that that had been through that. So it never really got diluted a whole lot. I mean, you think the Gas House Gang and the Cardinals and Frankie Frisch and then Leo DeRocher and the Dodgers and the Giants. I mean, it was self-perpetuating, because as young guys came up, they were indoctrinated into that culture. That's the way it was. Now, on top of that, even as guys started making more money, there still was there still were two questions. One is this guy going to, is the way they're swinging at me going to cost me my livelihood? But even more so, you're not going to show me up. It was an embarrassment thing. There's a lot about embarrassment in baseball, embarrassing of the team, embarrassing another player. So if you think about it in that way, players pitchers are competitive, and they're trying to get guys out, and they hate it when they don't. And if guys in their perception show them up, if hitters show them up, then there's going to be retaliation. Part of the showing them up is killing them, hitting them really hard. And the pitcher said, "That's enough. I'm not going to just stand here and let you beat my brains in." Right. And so that's the way this has gone. And so you fast forward now to my era, when it was still, all that was still in play. And then you get to, and the showing up part, what is important to think about, because in today's game, we're looking at, watching overlong, the long home runs, just standing admiring your home runs. Pitcher thinks that's showing them up. Bat flips. Pitcher thinks that's showing them up, and it causing unnecessary spotlight on how you beat him. And again, I can hear people screaming and saying, "Well, but that's what the hitter's supposed to do, and the guy should just get over it." And I get that, and it makes perfect sense, but that's not where the game has been. That's not what's been handed down. And that what's been handed down is ebbing out of the game at a slow pace. So you have to think about guys being real competitive and wanting to win and wanting to do well, and then not doing well in a big situation. Let's say, let's go back to the playoffs when the big bat flip in Toronto, in a big situation.
Bautista.
With Bautista, and he beat that pitcher game in the most dramatic and intense of times, and you can understand that the pitcher and the players of Toronto don't like the fact that he throws this big bat flip and he draws all this attention to himself about how he beat that pitcher and the other team. So again, I understand. everybody that says, well, too bad, that's the pitcher's fault. Yes, it is.